This episode is brought to you by FX's Shogun, the official podcast. Each week, host Emily Yoshida is joined by the creators, cast, and crew in this exclusive companion podcast. They dive deep into the twists and turns of the plot, go behind the scenes, and explore the real-life history that informed the limited series based on James Clavell's best-selling novel. Search FX's Shogun wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast presents Who Killed, a podcast that provides a voice for the voiceless. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Who Killed, the Presser of the Week. I'm your host, Bill Huffman, and this is a Slow Burn Media, Evergreen Podcasts, and Killer Podcast production. On this week's press conference, we are going to join the Portland Police as they announce the return of their cold case unit that had been disbanded in 2020. So this is something that they are able to do due to a grant, but after last week's press conference with the New Mexico police, I figured this would be another follow-up to the proactive approach that these cold case units and police departments are taking with the additional help of finances from the grant that they were given to do so. This will help solve some of the 250,000 plus unsolved cases in this country. Now, we do know that one of those cases is a case that is close to all of our hearts if you listen to the show, and that is the case of Amy Mihalovic. So all we can hope is that these cases and these units continue to do what they've been doing, and that is utilizing the technology that has been given to them due to the advancements in technology and DNA research. It is really a remarkable time to be alive, and I really hope, for the sake of all the families out there that are living without any answers, that these units will be able to provide one day some sense of closure. And again, that's not going to bring your loved one back, but it will at least provide some sort of answer to what may have happened. And again, this is a great thing to see across the country as these cold cases are becoming more important to these departments, and with the resources becoming more affordable, it's practical that they can do this stuff. Even smaller units in small departments, but the money's out there, the technology is out there, so let's just hope that they continue this and continue the trend of pretty much solving a new cold case every week. It's really kind of wild. So tune in, listen to what they have to say. They talk about why they disbanded the unit, and they also talk about why they've brought it back. And again, these are very important press conferences because they do tell you a little bit about what's going on and why they are doing what they're doing. So enjoy.
I speak for everyone here at the Bureau when I say we're absolutely thrilled to be here today and announcing that we're bringing back the cold case unit. For a variety of reasons, it was disbanded in 2022. Among those reasons, a rise in gun violence and homicides. And so, we had to move around and shuffle some resources. And in talking with Assistant Chief Chuck Lavelle, who was chief at the time, it was an incredibly difficult decision to disband the unit, and that's why we're thrilled to announce we're bringing it back. We have several speakers this morning. We'll be starting with Chief Bob Day. Following the chief will be Detective Brendan McGuire, who will be one of the 4 detectives on the unit. And we also are joined by George Spalding, who he and his wife lost their son Brian to a homicide in 2017. That case remains unsolved and is a case that this cold case unit can now review, now that it's being brought back. So with that, Chief?
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I want to thank, first of all, our Detective Division Commander Robinson, their leadership, the ability to secure this grant really is going to be it's a great benefit to us. I want to thank detectives that are sticking around to do that. I understand what it is to come out of retirement, and they have also graciously agreed to do the same and support this program. So I really want to thank both the detectives and the division and the forward thinking of investigations and the police bureau to be able to address this. And when Mike told me we were going to do a press conference, I've been thinking about this for the last few days and about the cold case unit. And I just want to share for a minute that a reflection that I've had towards my position and feelings about how we tackle this going forward. And as I've shared before, we've lost our son in 2016 to cancer, so certainly not a homicide connection, totally different form of loss, but knowing and understanding that loss. And I was thinking about the loss that these families have experienced of their loved ones. And the term cold case just didn't hit me very well. I've shared with the comms team, I don't have a different name, but I want the families to know and the community to know that I don't see these as cold cases. I would not want anybody telling me that my son's loss is cold. And it may seem like a small distinction, but I think it's so important that we remember that what we are attempting to do here is really provide that connection and that closure that is so deserving of the families that have experienced the loss that you see on the screen. So whether we will ultimately change the name from cold case to something else, I don't know. But I just want to affirm the fact that we are, to the best of our ability, very committed to trying to find resolutions and answers for folks. And this grant, at a time of limited resources, limited capabilities, is going to be a huge asset for us. So thank you for that. I'll be around a little bit for conversation. And Detective McGuire.
Of the four of us, I apparently drew the short straw and have got to speak with you guys today. The press release that the chief's office put out has some numbers and some dates and things, cold case investigations. And just so you know, Chief, I, having been doing this for a number of years, echo your feelings. And within the sort of cold case investigative community, it's more referred to as just unsolved cases.
Unsolved cases, thanks. Yes.
So, Portland started the unit in 2004 with a grant. It's been funded for since then for a number of years with sort of a patchwork of grants over the years, and or some years where the city was able to fund it. At one point we had 4 detectives and something on the order of 6 or 8 volunteers staffing the unit. And in 2022, when it was finally disbanded, we were down to just 2 of us. And that was the reason we were mostly down to 2 of us was because of COVID. We lost all of our volunteers, and then also staffing issues. And then, like the chief had mentioned, and like the press release mentioned, we had to sort of disband the unit entirely. And those 2 detectives, myself and Eric McDaniel, were still sort of limping along, working cold cases that we had already been working while taking on new cases. Unfortunately, well, that is unfortunate in and of itself, but even more unfortunate is that all came at a time when, as you know, nationally, advances in forensic science have made a lot of the unsolved cases that we had potentially solvable again. So it was sort of a double whammy in that we couldn't do the work, and yet the work was really expanding and really exciting to be part of, but we weren't able to do it. So in actually about this time last year, we a number of us got together. Susan Lehman, our SAKI site coordinator, in the back. So just to back up for a second, for those who don't know, this grant is actually an expansion of the SAKI grant, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, that Portland has been a participating member for probably 6-ish, 7 years. I don't know exactly, but something like that. This grant is actually an expansion of that, and there are 8 agencies nationwide that were participants in the SAKI program that are getting this grant, Portland being one of them. So when the feds announced that they were expanding this in this time last year, we jumped on the chance to apply for it, and luckily we got it. So the only other thing, the other thing that with this grant, other than the 4 detective positions, which we're keeping 4 very seasoned detectives. I've been with the Portland Police for 28 years. We have 3 others comparable to that ultimately we would have just lost our services when we retired. So that's a good thing. I think we're keeping that. We're also able to add an advocacy piece that hasn't been part of our work historically, where the grant funds advocate positions to reach out to victims' families and help keeping them in the loop, helping them with any support services they may need. And it provides crucial something on the order of $300,000 over the course of the years for outsourced testing, where a lot of those a lot of those forensic capabilities that we've talked about or that have been in the news lately in the last couple of years are beyond the capabilities of our Oregon State Police Crime Lab. But we can now afford to bring those to bear on cases that we weren't able to before. And yeah, so hopefully this will give us at least 3 years. This does give us 3 years. Hopefully we can maybe extend it beyond that to keep going. And ultimately, our goal is to bring as many of our unsolved cases up to current investigative standards as we can. And by doing that, hopefully solve some and bring some resolution, some justice to the case and to the families.
Our family is thankful that the feds have seen to provide the funding to restore the proper investigation into our son's homicide. It's going on 7 years since we lost him, and it's been very frustrating and heart-wrenching, as it has been for many other families here in Portland and nationwide. The senseless gun violence that's been going on, and the budget cutting and the effects of COVID and everything else has had a drastic effect on the investigation of old cases. And so we're glad to see that the funding is coming through to get people to concentrate on these cases and solve them, get some resolution to the families. And so we're looking forward to getting some more information about what's going on, and also hopefully there'll be other cases which are getting more information and resolution and closure for the families that have been involved and affected, and the community in general. We are hopefully on track for resolution and healing, and that's what we need.
Can I just ask? Yeah. I've talked to you on your porch before. Can you just kind of go through your son and explain his as much as you can?
Well, it was, it'll be 7 years ago, Monday, June 12th, 2017. And our son Brian did not show up for work and hadn't called in. Calls were made, including to us. So we went over to do a welfare check on him, and my wife and I found him shot to death. Worst day of my life. The detectives and criminalists worked the scene for 12 hours, and there wasn't a whole lot to go on, but they pursued it as best they could. And it's gone on for almost 7 years now. And there are other cases as well, but it just, every day we think of him and miss him, and think, what could have been, what should have been. We can't bring him back, but Brian was a great believer in personal responsibility, and there should be some justice in his case. And that's what we're hoping for. Responsibility. Everybody should have a high level of personal responsibility. If there was more of that going on, it wouldn't be so chaotic. And compassion.
Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Q&A.
Other
Can I
questions?
just ask, 22, the team went away, but when you guys are reassigned, you're still thinking about your cold cases, your unsolved cases. You didn't really let them go away. Can you just kind of go through that? You don't stop thinking about it, even though it's going to shut down.
No, absolutely. We don't stop thinking about them. We work them as best we could. Luckily, we were able to, I think I've been up here on a couple of other press conferences we were able to make a number of arrests with the Baby Precious case a couple months, or September, I believe. All these cases, and another case, the Mark Dribbin case back when we made the arrests in 2020. But it was continually worked after because he just pled guilty in November, I think it was. All these cases were worked as best they could, and you're right. We don't stop thinking about them, and that's why I personally and the other detectives who are now going to be working this, I think, are very, very excited about being able to take all those times that we were thinking about them and actually do something again.
How many cases currently are going to be assigned to the unit?
We have a ballpark of 300 unsolved homicides going back to the late 60s. And I say ballpark because the cases that we are allowed to work that will be funded by the grant, and historically the definition of a cold case that is in the Bureau policy are a little bit different. So we'll be able to work a little bit more recent cases than were technically determined to be cold cases before. So in the area of 300, and we also have the opportunity, slightly lower on the priority list, but certainly the opportunity the grant will fund working any violent crime, assaults, robberies, arson, those things as well.
So we all know that Portland is facing a lot of problems. There's a lot of important issues happening right now. But how important to you, to your detectives, to the Bureau, are these cases compared to, or even if you can compare it to what's happening right now?
That's a good question. And I'm not entirely sure. I've never thought about a comparison. So I don't know about a comparison necessarily in the level of importance. But like George said, and I think having George here and speaking from the heart as he did tells you how important these are. And for us as detectives, we don't, if a homicide, especially if a homicide can be solved 10 years after the fact or 10 minutes after the fact, we want to solve it. It's very important to us. And for those of us, we have a number of detectives coming back to this unit who have been homicide detectives for 10 years. And I know that they have, cases that they saw or got called out on in the middle of the night 10 years ago that have weighed on them. And so having the chance to reapply new techniques, new efforts to those is hugely important.
You mentioned 300 cases. Are any of those eligible for forensic testing right now? Any of those you've already identified that might be sent out for genetic genealogy or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. We have, before the unit disbanded in 22, one of the projects we started doing was looking through those cases with a specific eye to forensic investigative genetic genealogy. So we have a list, and we were only able to do a very cursory review, and so I can't give you numbers necessarily. But yes, we absolutely do, and those, even that review back in 22 resulted in 2 other cases being sent off, and one will probably be able to announce a resolution within the next month or so. But yes, so that is something that we do have cases right now ready to go, not only for genetic genealogy investigations, but just new DNA processing and things separate from genealogy that just may be able to be worked on older cases.
Does this mean staffing is getting to a point where you can open up, because you open up the traffic team? If you want to address that at all. we're at a point where.
Yeah. So, well, these 4 detectives have come out of retirement to do this. So, they're in addition to. We currently have, I think, about 10, Commander Robinson's here, we probably are right around 10 or 11 detective vacancies, and as well as, additional vacancies in other places. So from a staffing standpoint, into the prioritization conversation, right, it's as I've said many times, about resources, time, money, and people. We have had good success over the last couple of years around recruitment, hiring. We're seeing an increased amount of interest in people returning to the profession of policing, which we're appreciative of, as well as specifically to the police bureau. We just hired, 19 folks last month. We have another hiring ceremony we're talking about in April with a goal to hire 80. I still think that this year we're going to see a substantial amount of retirements, but I'm kind of hoping that this is the year where we sort of bottom out. And then in 2025, we can start to see an increase. So we're still working well below the required needed number, but we're constantly evaluating every day organizational needs, community priority, and expectations. That's what makes this grant funding such a benefit. I mean, we still have a number of officers working detectives working homicides. We still have a full court press on our gun violence reduction. But we're trying to be more efficient. Today we're combining some of our neighborhood response teams that are in the various precincts. They're all working downtown today. Last month I think they worked all out at East Precinct. So short answer, no, we don't have more bodies. Long-term answer, we're trying to be more efficient with what we do have, and we are trying to build back to a number that can be more applicable to the city our size and the challenges we're facing.
Have there been any advances in forensic technology or any other tools that have developed over the past couple of years while this unit has been out of service that you'll now be able to avail of?
Brendan?
Sure.
Thanks.
There have been, and when we can do things now, or we can't. The forensic science community can do things now like they can get DNA from hair samples with no roots. Historically, all my career, we've been told that if a hair sample didn't have the root from the hair, you're not getting any DNA from it. And so there's homicides going back all those years where detectives operate under that working theory that we can relook at now because that's changing. Within the last couple of years, the community's been able to start getting usable DNA samples from fired shell casings, which again, for all of my career, we've been told you can't do that. And so things like that have happened in the last handful of years. And it's not that we haven't been able to, or we haven't used those techniques on cases at all because this unit's been gone. Those techniques have been used on active homicide cases and shootings and other gun violence cases and things like that. But yes, we can now start looking at these older cases and applying those techniques to them that we never even would have thought of 5 years ago.
If I remember correctly, before the unit was disbanded, it relied maybe not heavily on retired detectives who were there volunteering to look at the evidence and to comb through that. Will that happen again?
At this point, that's not that's not a portion of what we're looking at, and you're right. The original model was we had retired investigators looking, basically doing the case reviews, and then if they saw any opportunities, it would get passed to an active investigator to take on. At this point, we don't have that built into the model. I don't know if it's sort of perhaps beyond me and our supervisory ranks to determine if we're going to look at bringing volunteers on again, but at this point, that's not part of the equation.
You talked about the funding and the manpower and now these new forensic capabilities that will help aid this unit, but we've also been told that a lot of times just, these PSAs, crime, tips, do bring in a lot of helpful knowledge. Is that part of this model? Are you guys going to be, doing press conferences like this to rely on the public to help bring some of these cases to a close?
Yes, and we actually wrote into the budget for the grant a portion for community outreach. And exactly what that's going to look like, I don't know. You see the cards that we've developed in the past. We've done billboards in the past. We do press conferences when we do have a case announcement. Exactly what we're going to do is not really fleshed out, but we do have additional money built in the grant for community outreach, and soliciting any tips from anybody who knows anything is always important, yes.
When does this officially start? Is this today? Is this March 1st? Is this?
January 1 is when we officially, yes, sort of got up and running.
So this has been going on for a couple months?
Yes.
No solving any yet?
Like I said, I think we'll probably have an announcement in the next month or so on one, but no, nothing.
I do believe, Commander, correctly, there was a suspect arrested in the South Waterfront shooting from a couple years ago that the cold case unit had a role in.
Yes, Commander Tim Robinson, detectives. There's been a couple cases recently that have been solved by members who are of the cold case unit who are have since retired. I think the one we talked about was Baby Precious, who did that one while you were still here. We talked about the security guard who was murdered a couple of years ago in the Waterfront Park. That was just, that was a solve. So, like our detectives and our chief has mentioned, just because the team wasn't fully activated, the detectives who are assigned to these cases are still working these cases. It matters to them, it matters to the victims, it matters to the community. So we have not stopped and we will not.
All right. I want to thank everyone for coming. Again, this is incredibly important work for the Bureau. Jim, to kind of go back to your question on the number of cases, we're in the neighborhood of 300 for homicides, but if you loop in the missing persons and violent crimes that are still within the statute of limitations, we're somewhere in the ballpark of 1,800 cases. But obviously the priority is homicides, so for your reporting purposes. And before you take off, please make sure you take note here. These are a lot of the faces of victims of cases unsolved that we hope to bring closure to. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this week's episode of Who Killed the Presser of the Week. I hope you garnered some knowledge about what it is that these cold case units do with their time, and it is super interesting to hear it from the horse's mouth. So I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I drop new episodes every Friday. The Presser of the Weeks come and go here and there, but try to stay consistent. And you can follow me on Twitter at BillHuffman3. Again, I am opinionated, and that is all I'll say about that. But it is what it is, and if you'd like to follow me on any other podcast platform, you can do so. I'm available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, you name it, I'm there. So just check me out, and again, as always, until next time, be healthy and stay safe.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
24 hours ago, I found out the person that I'd been dating and seeing for the last 6 months as a con man.
That is my sister Emma. Andrew Tonks's lies had been so convincing, she'd invested $300,000 with him. However, the tables were about to turn on Andrew. What he didn't know was that Emma had discovered his real identity. But to get any chance of justice, Emma had to act like it was business as usual. Coming up in this series,
and that's when murder, all this stuff goes through my mind. I'm really, really scared.
I'm assuming Sarah has watched too much Netflix and figures I've been defrauding you. Couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what this was, a real life story that seems so unbelievable, but it was actually true.
A true story that all starts with one simple swipe to the right. I'm Sarah Ferris.
And I'm Emma Ferris, and this is my story, Conning the Con.